The Patriotic Millionaire's goal is to reform the country's political economy so that it delivers the results that we need for a stable, prosperous, and inclusive nation. We focus our work on taxes, wages, and the distribution of political power. Those are the three legs of the three-legged stool that is any country's political economy. As it is currently constructed, our political economy is going to guarantee that we become more unequal more quickly over time. We are at 100-year level highs of inequality. This has to be addressed before this entire nation falls apart. So we have a fantastic piece of advocacy to ask you all to do today. 2 weeks ago, we introduced, along with partners in the House, a bill that is an innovative approach to dealing with this central problem that we are facing, which is inequality. It is called the Oligarch Act. And for obvious reasons, we are in the middle of the richest people in the country and in the world trying to assert a level of control in our economy and our society that is unacceptable to people who believe in democratic capitalism. And so we have introduced a bill and are increasingly getting more sponsors to it that is basically a never before seen approach to tax policy. Right now, we're going to do a little briefing about what the policy is. And then at the end of that, we are going to have questions, and then we are going to ask you to contact your representative. If your representative is already on the bill, email them and thank them. If they are not on the bill, email them and ask them to get on the bill. And this is how we're going to run these calls. Okay, so every month, we're going to say, this is the thing that we think is most important for you to do today. And then we will follow up with emails and things. For this, we're now doing all open. So hopefully we're going to grow and grow and grow and grow all of this in preparation for the 2025 tax battle. Keep that figure in your head. So they passed a big new tax bill on party lines in 2017. They basically rewrote 90% of the American tax code, okay, handing a huge giveaway to millionaires, corporations, leaving working people in the dust as usual. The portion of the tax cuts that expire in 2025, they had to have some of them expire after 10 years, so it didn't cost so much. So the Congressional Budget Office, you'll hear people talk about the CBO score. So the CBO score was not that bad. So this is a bunch of the individual provisions. They made all the corporate stuff basically permanent. This is the expiration of the individual provisions of the so-called Orwellian name Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So in 2025, there's going to be an epic battle. What we are doing over the course of the next year and a half is socializing the big ideas that we think will transform the American political system. So the first one of those is the Oligarch Act. So we want to begin to socialize the idea and to build support for it. And we as a community with you all want to practice doing our work together. Okay, because when we get to 2025, this call will be an hour. It'll probably happen more like every week instead of every other week. But we want to get our, get our sea legs underneath us. So I'm sure that some of y'all have experience in political advocacy. Some of you have a little bit less. So this is just going to be how we get ourselves started. Before we go on to the presentation, quick introduction of Bob Lord, our first introduction of Bob Lord, our senior tax counsel. Bob, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your background?
Sure. I came to the Patriotic Millionaires about a little over a year ago. Prior to that, I spent most of my career as a practicing tax attorney and joined forces with Americans for Tax Fairness in 2021 to work on the Build Back Better legislation. For the last, 10 years or so, I've also been working with the Institute for Policy Studies on advocacy where inequality and the tax law intersect. So a lot of work on the estate tax and a lot of work on wealth taxation, the millionaire income tax, and recently the Oligarch Act.
And so basically what Bob is admitting to you, please don't hold it against him, is that he spent the vast majority of his career helping rich people avoid taxes. And now he has come to the other side, thankfully, to help us figure out how to make sure that the richest people in the country don't avoid their taxes. And since Bob has been helping them for years and years to do just that, he is a perfect expert to guide us in repairing this tax code, because we have two problems. One is the wealthiest people in the country evade taxes illegally in many cases, but the bigger problem, and that's a big problem enough, but the bigger problem is that we actually have a tax code that, like, why bother to evade? Because if you're rich enough, you don't have to pay any taxes anyway. So these are the problems that we're trying to solve. What I'm going to do now is turn it over to Dylan. Now that the chat is open, enter any comments or questions you have in that. Dylan will do a quick presentation about what the Oligarch Act is, what we're hoping to accomplish, and then where you should direct your advocacy, and then we'll open it up for questions. Dylan, go ahead.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining today. I am going to do a quick screen share real quick. Everybody seeing that okay? Oh, there it is. Good. All right, thanks everyone for joining today. So as Eric said, we have been working for over a year with partners in Congress to introduce a new piece of legislation that we think will not only help us tax the rich effectively, but will also help shrink inequality and really help protect our democracy from turning into an oligarchy where the rich hold all the power. In that vein, it is called the Oppose Limitless Inequality Growth and Reverse Community Harms, or Oligarch Act. I will be calling it the Oligarch Act from here on out because that is a mouthful. So, how do we resolve rich people not paying their taxes? There's basically 4 courses of action we can take, right? The first is to tax wealth. The second is to tax what I'll call their real income, which means taxing capital gains like stocks or real estate investments of billionaires. Currently, they only pay taxes on that if they sell it, and they're able to avoid taxes for decades or sometimes their entire lives, and their children's lives and their grandchildren's lives, while still becoming more and more wealthy and powerful. The third option is to tax the transfer of wealth, like inheritance or gifts. And finally, there's the option where you do nothing and let rich people take over the country. We definitely don't like that last one. The inheritance and estate tax system has become extremely loophole ridden and is bordering on useless in its current form. There is an effort underway to tax that real income, which we support, but we really believe the best option and the one we pursue as the Oligarch Act is to tax total wealth. So, what does the Oligarch Act actually do? It is an annual wealth tax on a small subset of the absolute wealthiest households in this country. To be clear, a wealth tax is a tax on all assets that a household owns. Most of you, I know I do, probably pay taxes from your paycheck at work, but for the richest people, if they take a paycheck at all, it's usually a very small portion of their real wealth. Jeff Bezos was famous for taking a salary of $80,000 a year at Amazon, but in reality was making hundreds of millions to billions some years. The threshold for the taxes based on multiples of median household wealth. So that means as inequality grows and the rich get richer while the median household gets poorer, they will have to pay more in taxes until inequality shrinks to an acceptable level. And if the inequality shrinks, they pay less. The tax is 2% on all wealth between 1,000 and 10,000 times median wealth, 4% between 10,000 and 100,000 times the median, 6% on wealth between 100,000 and 1 million times the median, and 8% on all wealth over 1 million times the median. Right now, there are only 3 people who touch that 8% bracket. That's Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Larry Ellison, if you're curious. For reference, the current median household is worth about $120,000 right now, just a little over that. So this tax would kick in at about 120 million in wealth. There are a few advantages to structuring the tax this way. So instead of setting thresholds at a specific number of wealth, like some previous proposals have, We do it this way because firstly, it automatically waxes and wanes as wealth inequality expands or decreases. And it doesn't require Congress to constantly adjust the thresholds. It just happens naturally. Secondly, it really highlights the fact that the danger here is levels of inequality and not just the idea of rich people getting a lot of wealth in the abstract. And finally, it asks the mega ultra wealthy to pay more than just the normal ultra wealthy, which is good because it really does start to slide up the scale even among the very, very rich. So what is the purpose of the Oligarch Act and what makes inequality so dangerous, right? Right now, research shows us that 400 wealthiest households in America hold 22,000 times more political power than the average member of the 90%, while the top 100 richest had 60,000 times as much political power. We've opened the doors to almost unlimited political spending. And if we don't do anything to constrain inequality, the extremely rich will be able to take over our entire democracy. Not to sound alarmist, not to mention our economy is driven by consumers. We need an economically stable middle and working class to keep the economy from getting too top heavy. If all the wealth flows to the top unrestrained, whole thing topples over. It's like a Jenga board. So the Oligarch Act is designed to automatically restrain the growth of inequality. You could think of it like a restrictor plate in NASCAR or guardrail on the highway or any other metaphor that helps prevent disastrous crashes. What makes the tax first of its kind is that the goal is not to raise money to pay for programs. It will raise a lot of money for a while, but if we do our job right and help to shrink inequality effectively, it will become the magical disappearing tax that can save democracy. So we introduced the Oligarch Act in Congress last week. We have a really great list of co-sponsors in place. Hopefully, some of you are seeing your members of Congress on this list. As Erica said, we'd really love for you to contact them and thank them for sponsoring the Oligarch Act. They get a lot of feedback that is people yelling at them. It's really equally important to let them know when you notice they do the right thing. That is an incentive for them to keep doing it. And if you don't see your member of Congress on this list, you can Google or you can go to house.gov/representative/find your representative, or if you just Google find my representative, it's going to be the first result. All you have to do is put in your zip code and it will show you who your rep is and it will link you to their website and email. This is a system maintained by the House of Representatives, so very reliable. And we encourage you to either use the email or contact form on their website or call their DC office. And the basic ask is to demand they sponsor HR 4919, the Opposed Limitless Inequality Growth and Reverse Community Harms Oligarch Act. For those of you who are nervous about what to say or remembering the acronym, we'll send around a sample template for you to use as well. And now I've got time for questions and comments.
All right.
Stop the share.
All right, good. Thank you, Dylan. And again, just to hit a couple of the big points of this, you hear often people talking about, oh, we've got to pay for that. Mitt Romney said he didn't want to extend the child tax credit, which lifted millions of children out of poverty because it wasn't paid for. Pay for is the phrase that people use when they don't want to pay for something. That's why we centered this law on attacking inequality itself, as opposed to targeting it to raise revenues for a specific program. Regardless of what you think of deficit spending, most folks would agree that most of the people complaining about deficits are the people on the opposite side of the political aisle to whoever is in charge. Okay, so they may care about deficits, but they only seem to really care about them when the other side wants to spend money, and that's true for both parties. And so this is not about revenue, not about pay for. And it centers this on inequality. And as Dylan said, huge amount of money up front to repair community harm as inequality shrinks to levels that are stable for the country as opposed to where we are now, the tax will go away. So we have some questions in the chat. I want people to enter more questions. So Jim Reeser, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Jim. Can the oligarch lower his or her tax burden by dividing wealth to multiple levels of family members? Bob, you want to take that one?
Sure. They could, but not right away, I guess is the answer. The way the act is structured, for the first 5 years after someone makes a gift, the gifted wealth is included in their total wealth. And also, when you're dealing with folks at this level of wealth, we're talking about $120 million and up, unloading their wealth will have a gift tax consequence if they have it going to family members. Now, what they could do is they could gift it to a charity, and that would they would be able to get out of the tax by doing that.
But they also wouldn't have the money.
That would be a good thing, actually.
Unless they gave it to their DAF, their donor advised fund, that they never had to pay out of. But charity reform is going to be a topic for another conversation. Fred Hickling says, what % will cease to be US citizens? Fred, are you talking about like when people leave, like the whole myth that they're going to leave because they're getting taxed too much? Is that what you're talking about, Fred? I just want to make sure that we're answering Fred, is that what you're thing? So, I mean, I'll let Bob or Dylan hit either one of these, either Dylan or Bob.
My guess would be 0.03%.
All right, so Fred, write that down, and we're going to be taking bets on an over/under when we get Oligarch passed, how many people denounce their citizenship. I will say there is a huge amount of mythology around the fact that people leave to avoid taxes. 2 ways to think about that in your head. First is, if you are super rich, don't you think that one of your first priorities will be to live wherever in the world you want to live? That's number 1. So it sort of doesn't even make sense on its face. Number 2.
Oh, thank you.
Oh wait, Marissa, will you mute yourself? That's number 1. Number 2, people have actually studied the millionaire flight, and it doesn't actually happen. When New York raised its taxes on millionaires, the number of millionaires in New York went up. I guess third thing, Fred, is denouncing your US citizenship is actually a lot harder than people think. So some people have done it, but it's not a risk we are concerned about. The risk that we are concerned about is unlimited inequality growth. And we currently have a tax system that is turbocharging the growth of inequality. And so if Jeff Bezos wants to move to Canada, Canada can have him. That's my thought. All right. So
let me just add to that, Erica. If Jeff Bezos wanted to move to Canada, he would probably have to pay a tax of around $40 billion here to do it, because he would be taxed on all his unrealized gains in order to leave.
All right, perfect. Since all the co-sponsors are Democrats, does this have any chance of passing? This is David Winograd's question. David, today, absolutely not. Not a snowball's chance in hell of passing, period. And that is how these things go. That's why I said the purpose of us getting together and asking you to focus on this is, number 1, we need a fundamentally different approach to our tax system. We have a tax system that's going to destroy the country. We need a new approach. It's not going to happen this Congress, but there is a 51 vote threshold for changes to tax policy as opposed to a 60 vote threshold. So the debate that is going to happen, it stormed in Washington. Did y'all hear that? It is like hurricane crazy. Number 2, the big fight is going to happen in 2025. So you got to think about this. Politics is a long game. Okay, you've got to get the ideas out there and start surfacing them among lawmakers. And think about that. You got like 535 customers. You've got to get to every single one of them with the idea that you're going to close 51% of them, 51 in the Senate in 2025, but you've got to surface the ideas first, get press around them, force politicians to react to them. People started bringing up the wealth tax a few years ago, and you hear all of this, no, it's unconstitutional, not going to happen, blah, blah, blah. Well, we're continuing to see the public appetite for a wealth tax increase, specifically for the reasons that Dylan said, which is there's no other way to tax these people. They don't have any income because they borrow against their assets. So they actually have loans to pay their living expenses. So their assets grow. You can't do it a transfer because they have obliterated the estate tax and other mechanisms. You can do unrealized capital gains, which is certainly one option. There's a great piece of legislation around that. The wealth tax is the best piece of legislation to do this. It will take us a few cycles to get this up. One of the things I explained to y'all in our last call is that every Congress, they introduce the bills again. So if they don't get passed, they have to reintroduce them every Congress. So all the bills that you saw in old Congresses, they come up and get like freshened up or dismissed. So in 2025, we have a lot of support. Y'all, the fact that we have Jamie Raskin, Jerry Nadler, they're very serious people. Barbara Lee's running for campaign in California. These are very high profile, seen as very, very serious people. The fact that we've gotten this much traction a week in with this kind of interesting, and 8% is a big number. And so we feel really good about this. So what we want to use us for, our group for here, American Deciders, is to push the envelope, push the Overton window, open up the parameters underneath which these final negotiations will happen. Michelle Swinson says, did I understand Dylan to say that the oligarch tax is progressive based on the amount of wealth? Dylan.
Yes, you did understand that correctly. So as you go up the wealth scale and you get into higher multiples of median household wealth, the tax is progressive, similar to how the income tax is.
Okay. How do you get support of the corporate Dems and the GOP who are controlled by the same oligarchs? Jim, an excellent question. I think that that's exactly what we're trying to do. And what you can do is media pressure, personal pressure, and constituent pressure, and then make there be a political cost for them. I will tell you the amount that we have seen the debate around taxes move in the last 10 or 12 years has been astronomical. So, I mean, back in the Bill Clinton years, you weren't going to hear anybody talking about taxing people. So the fact that we're moving in a good direction.
I'll also just add that the more people are aware of your awareness of the fact that some of them have been bought and paid for, and that you are taking political action on it, the more fearful they will be to be so brazen about that, and the more they will become willing to adopt ideas like this.
All right, European countries, this is from Jerry. European countries have reversed their wealth tax. Some say it's because it didn't work. Why do you think a wealth tax will work? Bob.
I think it's a little bit different here. I mean, it's not too much of a lift to move from France to Belgium. To leave the United States to live somewhere else is a much more difficult proposition. And we have an expatriation tax. This tax would be on US citizens. So you'd have to give up your citizenship to avoid this tax. And by giving up your citizenship, you have to pay tax on all your unrealized gains. That's why I said before that Jeff Bezos it would cost him about $40 billion to move to Canada to avoid this tax.
No, Bob, what about the fact that everybody says you can't even measure it? These people are so rich, you can't even like count it up. Thoughts?
Well, we already do that. We have an estate tax, and folks have to, estates have to file an estate tax return showing all the assets of the person who died and placing values on them. And I think as this tax is implemented, there will be conventions where values from a previous year can be assumed to increase by a certain percentage rather than going and getting an asset reappraised unless someone wants to. But remember, these are hugely rich people, mostly billionaires. They'll be able to solve this problem of placing values on their assets every year and putting them on a tax return.
Well, and one of the Go ahead, Dylan.
Oh, I'll also add that the legislation includes minimum audit rates for people in this group to make sure we are keeping up with enforcement and keeping reports honest.
And it's the minimum, it's a 30% minimum audit rate. So they will have the
Correct.
ability to self-report, and then that self-reporting, 1/3 of them will be audited. So I will say, I think it would be an interesting exercise to see like the back and forth between their wallet and their ego, you know, to see what numbers they're going to put down. But in terms of like, I also want to sometimes arm y'all with little phrases that can help you get over the objections of your friends. Because really what I want you to do is, number one, I want you to email your lawmaker. That's number one. Number two, I want you to email your friends. If you have an extra piece of work in you, let your friends know this new bill got introduced. This is really important, because we are trying to build a citizen movement backed by the patriotic millionaires to climb into every lawmaker's office who we need to see make different choices about this economy so this country can stabilize itself and get back to where it needs to go. So also share with your friends. Now, what you're going to hear from your friends is, you know, you can't measure the wealth. That's what people will say. This is what you say back to them. We have a rover on Mars. We can figure out what some rich guy's worth. That's literally all I ever say, because it's actually a stupid argument. Okay, I will tell you, when I talk to rich people, you ask one of them how much the other one's worth, they can tell you within a few $1,000s. They know what each other is worth. So I mean, the audit should really come from each other, but we're not going to, that is not an issue that we think is a problem. So what I would love is for y'all to send your lawmaker, report back if you get something back, send it to your friends, report back if you get something back, and we'll deal with all your friends and your lawmakers' objections in our next call. Forward them along to us if you want to have us prepared in advance, or you can just bring them up at the next call and we'll talk them through. And I think I really want to try to keep us to really, how do we get Gen Zers, et cetera, involved in our mission? We're doing everything we can. Y'all can share the, you can invite them to this. You can reach out to people that you know who are younger. We'd love to include them. Our goal is to build this over time, as I said. So let's see, many of us pay property tax locally for fire, et cetera. One could think of this as a national asset tax. We could think of as a tax for the national equivalent of FEMA. I like thinking about it like that, Fred, because certainly, you know, the country's on fire at the moment. At what level of wealth will the tax take effect? Cheryl, it takes effect at the 1,000 times the median wealth. So the median wealth is 121,000. So 1,000 times that is 121 million. But again, if inequality shrinks, you know, if the median wealth goes up, it'll be 1,000 times more of that, whatever that is. And that's what we love about this piece of legislation, is it's tied to inequality, not to a specific dollar figure. It is exactly 6 o'clock. We're going to wrap. I love seeing everybody's faces. How fun. Thank you for joining us. Please send your emails, report back. Median and median is lower. You are so right, Fred. Thank you. We will be careful of the terms. It is it's median net worth.
It is the median net worth, and Fred, that number comes from the Fed.
Okay, y'all, thanks. We'll see you in a month. Have a great rest of the summer. We'll see you after Labor Day. Send us your notes, send us your feedback. We will send you an email template. Please email your congressperson, report back that you did if you want to. We would love to hear from you. And number two, email your friends if you have that extra thing, and we'll see you in September. Thank you. Bye, y'all.